Hey folks, this is Bomdeezy on the ICC, and I'm coming at you with another video lesson. Now today we're going to be looking at two games in the symmetrical variation of the English opening. One game was played by yours truly in the ICC's Team 45-45 League, and the second game was played by two players slightly more talented, Grandmasters Vishy Anand and Veselin Topalov. So first we're going to look at my game because it's pretty short. And I made a couple of instructive errors that hopefully we can learn a couple things from, and then we're going to look and see how the good guys do it. So this game started off as a symmetrical English opening, pawn to c4, pawn to c5, and black often tries to use this as a drawing mechanism, trying to keep symmetry in the position. Oftentimes, chess dogma states that symmetrical pawn structures are drawish. Now, however, white and black can both use this symmetry to their advantage, breaking the symmetry at the right time to gain a much-needed initiative for an attack a little bit later on in the opening and into the middle game. So my second move for white is knight f3. Also playable here is knight c3. Eyeing more protection on d5. And black plays knight c6 here. And see, I've already broken some of the symmetry in this position. If I would have played knight c3 right here, I would have gone and invited black to play knight f6. And here we have more symmetry, but I was trying to avoid that as much as possible. And as we'll see later on in the game, so was black. So I continued with pawn to g3, preparing to fianchetto the light squared bishop on g2. And he plays g6. Keeping some of this similar ideas of symmetry in the position. I play bishop to g2, and he plays bishop to g7. I castle. He plays e6. And what he's preparing to do is to develop his knight to this e7 square, which is very nice because it allows the bishop to have its maximum access on this nice long diagonal. I play knight to c3 here, and if you want to look in a chess database, you'll see that this is all still a very theoretical position. And this is kind of nice about the English opening, is because you can play very natural looking moves, and oftentimes they're okay. At least they're not bad. If you don't have so many problems with the move orders being incorrect and that costing you too heavily. This is more of a just kind of go out there and play chess. Okay. So after knight to c3, he played knight g to e7. And what this move is doing is it's possibly eyeing even the f5 square, but also, as we previously stated, keeping this bishop on a nice open diagonal. And next we played queen c2. And I thought this was probably my first relatively poor move of the game. We're going to look in our second game that a much better opportunity could have been d3. Just protecting the c4 pawn. And we're going to see that the queen moving may have lost a turn after castles, bishop to d2, or possibly bishop to f4, threatening the immediate queen d2, or queen c1, making this nice long battery attacking the g7 bishop, eliminating that very powerful attacker and defender of the dark squares around the black king. Okay, but we could also do bishop d2, afterwards b6, preparing to fianchetto the light squared bishop of blacks, and then a3, keeping the black knight out of b4. And here this is a pretty equal position. But we can see that white is trying to plan for b4 with this bishop and his pawn on a3, and he can move his rook underneath to b1. Okay, in the game, queen c2, and black castled. And I looked after the game because I thought this was a bad move, and I tried to ask the computer what it thought, and it said that it wasn't too bad of a move, and the best refutation to queen c2 that Ribka 3 could come up with was b6, then d3, bishop d7, then bishop f4, d5 striking in the center, and queen d2 creating that battery. But now we can see that that queen has cost us one tempo, starting at d1, moving to c2, and then to d2, instead of moving to d2 or c1 straight away. So after queen d2, castles, rook a to d1, queen to d7, bishop to h6, trying to eliminate the powerful piece, f6, bishop takes, king takes, and d4. And its position looks pretty complex, but alright for white. It has pretty good piece activity, has good development. Black's a8 rook is still pretty out of the game. So it's still a game, though. It's a chess game. So, okay. In the game, black didn't play b6. Black castled, which is perfectly reasonable. And I played another relatively bad move, b3. And what b3 allows is knight to d4. And that's a really unpleasant threat, because the knight is kind of stuck there, and the knight cannot take, because after pawn takes, this knight is under attack. But also there's a line on this bishop and the rook. So after the knight moves away, the pawn comes to d3, attacking the queen, and the rook is also being attacked by the bishop. So one of them has to move away, which is the queen, and then black scoops up that rook. But white has some counterplay. After d takes e2 and rook to e1, white will pick the pawn on e2 up, next move, and after a move freeing him in the center like d3, white might be able to capitalize on these weak dark squares among the king here on g7, h6, f6, g5, etc. Okay, so after b3, black blundered right back by playing a nothing move, rook to b8. It seems to be threatening b5, but it's a little slow, and it didn't capitalize like knight to d4 possibly could have. And then I play a3, which is another weak move. Better would have been bishop to b2, and then followed by b6. Knight to d4 wouldn't be a good move, because there's no more shenanigans with the bishop coming down on the rook. So after the knight took and the pawn took, the knight can move away, and the pawn is vulnerable, and the bishop is guarded by the queen, and everything is held down. And black has doubled pawns, and black is the one trying to prove equality here. So no, I didn't play bishop to b2, I played a3, and black followed up with b6, which is a natural move. Now the next move I did play bishop to g2, and black played d5, trying to break in the center. Now I was thinking about taking, but taking wouldn't be advantageous for white, as I would trade off my strong c4 pawn for black's weak e6 pawn. Not necessarily weak, but my c4 pawn is having more influence on the center than black's e6 pawn. Then I play another poor move, knight to b5. Now we're going to look in our model game that knight to b5 was played, but in a more advantageous situation for white, after black had already created the very nice square for him. Okay. Then black took the bishop on b2, and white we captured with the queen, and black played d4. Now this gives the knight a predicament as it's out of good squares to go to. I'd say it can't go to here or here because of the queen. Can't go to here because that's guarded by the knight. And it can't go back. This is guarded by the pawn. That's guarded by this pawn. So the knight's kind of stuck, and that's not very good for white. So naturally he played a4 to give the knight an escape square. And black shores up his pawns in the middle with e5, possibly threatening e4 and some kingside's attack. Now to stop that, I played d3. We're going to see in our model game that d3 is played much earlier. Now black plays bishop to e6 here. And this seems like a fruitless move because it seems like it's provoking my next move. Knight to g5, which is attacking this bishop, and putting the question as to what his intentions are to do. What's black's intentions on keeping the bishop or exchanging it? Now black wishes to keep it, and it seems that he's lost a tempo, and even after the pawns kick my knight back, let's say with f6 or h6, the knight could easily retreat back to f3 or possibly find an even better home on e4. And black wasted a move, so white can waste it right back, and there would be no net loss. Okay, so after knight g5, the bishop moved back to d7, and the queen moved to d2. And the reason the queen moved to d2 is because it was eyeing this nice diagonal. And since there's no dark squared bishop to defend these dark squares, the queen can act very nicely, as it's unopposed by an enemy bishop. And the queen can be complemented by this knight, say with a plan like knight to e4 followed by the queen coming up to h6, and then the knight coming back to h5, threatening h7 mate. Now, black played a6 to kick the knight. Now, Ripka suggested that I move the knight earlier, but I thought that I wanted to wait for black to play a6, because by playing a6 he used a move. I had to move the knight anyways, so black kind of said, here, just move, and I'll just move my pawn and you move it for free. So I said thanks, and I moved my knight back to a3. He moved his knight to f5, and better here was probably f6, putting the question to that knight, where's it going to go? We're going to find out that f6 square is a little bit delicate here in a second, so that would cover a lot of bases later in the game, and it would also provoke the knight to go back to f3 and take away a lot of the prospects of knight to e4. Let's say if the knight did go here, f5, and then back knight to g5, but what's his future? But black didn't play f6, black played knight to f5, where I was able to capitalize with the move knight to e4, placing the knight on a very nice active central square, affecting the key squares in the black camp, key dark squares that are not defended, and also eyeing this touchy f6 square with a check on the enemy king. Now, black plays bishop to e6, threatening the battery, and to return the favor that white performed on black, with the queen and the bishop exchanging off the fianchettoed bishop. But this is a very dangerous plan, as there's very delicate squares in the black camp that need to be attended to. Say f6, and white plays knight to c2, bringing his worst minor piece back into the game via e1 and f3. And here it was sad because black played a terrible move here with queen to d7, losing immediately. And this will be a good beginner's tactic video or puzzle. See what the move is to win. Alright, you guessed it, sports fans. It's knight to f6 check, and the king and the queen are forked, ending the game. So this game took a little longer to go over than I thought. So we're going to do another video where we're going to look at Anand versus Topalov in this same line in the Symmetrical English variation. But for now, this is Bomb DZ signing off. Thanks.